Welcome back
to Counterculture. Listen, that's Pastor Mark. I am Andy. If you're back, and then you were given a whole bunch of things to chew on last week, and that's good. Being counterculture-ish is about pondering things. It is about slow cooking our theology and our responses to people. Right? We live in a world that is very, very reactional in nature and responsive in nature. We see something, we just poof. We never ponder things, right? I think about it all the time. I don't know about your experiences, but there have been several times where I have walked into church, been in a service, and you're seeing somebody crying in the front, right? Somebody's at the altar and they're just crying, and you're immediately thinking one way, and you get up there and you realize very quickly it's not what it's perceived. Right? Like I'm like, oh, this person is crying over their sin and they're crying out to God. No, that's not what they're crying over. You know, we do a lot of assuming in situations in church, right? Assume that everybody who comes forward wants to meet Jesus. No, that's not true. So one of the things we were just talking about last time in Jeremiah 23 is we were talking about bad priests, bad prophets. God calls them out. And one of the reasons that God is calling out bad prophets and priests is simply because we have become responsive and reactional to our culture, right? You talked about the early 90s, and I lived through that too, where everything was seeker sensitive. All of a sudden, we opened up the doors of our churches to a bunch of stuff.
Yes.
Under the guise that if we let them in, if we compromise on letting people in, that will give us opportunities. And then they're going to see us and they're going to ask, questions, and they're going to want us. But the truth of the matter is it hasn't really worked out that way. We compromised, let people in, and now we have a bunch of compromised people in our churches that you and I, for the last 30 years, have been trying to figure out what to do with. But we said in the 90s, and we still say today to some degree, that, well, it's okay, right?
The church is full.
Right. There's a big difference between just as I am, come as you are, and feel free for the next 30 years to stay as you are. Right? That's the thing. So a lot of these priests and prophets, right, that God would be talking to in our own churches, you kind of ended that. Man, God's not in every church in our country. They have gotten to the place that they got because they started compromising, right? They compromised their time with God. They compromised the message with God, and they're attracting people out of compromise. So, talk to us a little bit about the concept of compromising and maybe some of the harm you've seen it done. But then let's talk about, all right, God calls us a bad priest, a bad prophet, probably because we've spent some time compromising. How do we get back to uncompromising? We've created this mess, and you and I are constantly clean up and aisle nining this mess. How do we, is the only way to do that blow it up and start over? Because a lot of pastors believe that that's true, and that's what they do. They get fed up.
It's their ministry.
Right. They get fed up, they get done, and they blow it all up and they go start somewhere else. Right? And then they end up 20 years from now in the exact same place, same place. Talk to me about this whole idea of compromising.
Well, I think we've gone to this. Okay, so the thought that came to mind that I was talking about last time I talked about the young man. I was, said, why do you want a church wedding? Okay. I'm guilty of it. I'm guessing you might be. Maybe not. I don't know.
I'm pretty unperfect. So
how many pastors married someone with the thought, well, if we go ahead with this wedding in the church, maybe they'll start coming.
Maybe they'll get it. Yep. Nope.
Of all the weddings I've done in 30-some years of ministry, here's how many times that worked.
Yeah, me too.
0.
Can't think of a time that it worked.
Big 0.
Even in moments with a lot of appreciation, where they were legitimately appreciative.
Yeah.
Yep, did get into church.
Yeah. And so how is this where a lot of this started? Well, if we can get them in with a less strict code, so to speak, or opportunity. If we can make God less harsh, then we can get him in, and then we'll straighten him out later. Now, if I remember correctly, that's called bait and switch.
Yeah. Yep, I could talk about that a lot later.
I read something several years ago that said when people come to Christmas services, they want to hear Christmas songs that they're familiar with.
That's why they're coming.
That's why they're coming. Then it went to, there was a study done, and I don't remember all the statistics and everything, but the conclusion was if someone is coming to church, they don't want to hear the style of music they've been listening to all week. They come expecting something different.
But that's not what we do.
But that's not what we do.
We flip it and say, they're not listening to this kind of music all week, so we need to play the music that they are listening to.
Or I will get someone said to me one time when they were picking out songs at a church when this was starting to go on, and I was new, and they're, well, Pastor, we don't want to sing those old hymns. Those are just stale. You ever listen to those old hymns? I sing them on Moments with Mark. The theology of them is amazing. Sometimes some of it's not so good, but I mean, the theology is deep. It's not, you're going to walk away pondering it.
Except for that, I agree with everything you just said, except for in our culture today, most people are not listening to music for the words. They know the words because they're catchy, but they don't, because we have people with modern contemporary Christian music that are singing words every Sunday to these choruses that actually have meaning. Some of them
I'm not dismissing that. Not dismissing that.
But they're singing songs, and they have no idea. It doesn't matter what they're singing to God.
Yep.
It is crazy to me. Some Sundays I sit and I listen to the song that we just sang, and I look out and go, "Do you all have a clue what you just sang?"
Yeah,
and they don't.
And so now there's one more contemporary song that I listened to that, of course, Charles and John Wesley used to get into arguments over the theology of Charles's songs.
Yep.
And we should have that more today now.
That'd be great. Because
there's one particular song that's very popular, and there's a line I did not think about. I kind of thought about it, I didn't think about it. Then it was brought to my attention. I'm like, that is really a bad line. Now, can I preach around that bad line and straighten out that bad theology and still keep the gist of the rest of the song? I could, but how about we just get better theology and we quit doing this? So now the big thing is, what is the most loving thing we can do in that situation? Okay. That was recently brought to my attention from someone who asked my opinion about something. They said, well, another colleague of mine said, well, the most loving thing we can do is what they're asking us to do. Except for what it was doing is it was asking us to lie, number one, and to be deceptive.
Yeah.
And no. And we're not also saying to them, well, you need to consider the people you want to treat you this certain way. You need to consider that you're asking them to do something that they don't agree with. And so it gets really muddled. And isn't the most loving thing we can do, though, truthfully, is to speak the truth in love to people? Because that is what we need to do. Now, do I think we need to go hammering people? And I had a lady say to me one time between Sunday school and church, Pastor, do people have to get married or can they just live together? I said, well, do you want to have sex or don't you? Mm-hmm. And she goes, well, yeah. I said, well, they need to get married because otherwise it's called fornication. And she just looked at me, she goes, oh, okay. I didn't judge her. And she would, if I had her on here right now, she would tell you, I did not judge her. She didn't feel judged. She asked a question. I answered it.
Yep.
And I didn't say, and you're going to hell if you don't do it.
So you didn't.
I'm still going to love you, even if you and your boyfriend still are living together.
You didn't have
live
to
in sin.
compromise to keep her respect.
No.
Got it.
Matter of fact, she had my respect. She has more respect for me for that. And it was funny. 2 weeks later, I said, Pastor, we want to get married.
Yeah.
We want to do this right.
Now, some people would say you guilted them into.
I didn't
getting
shame
married.
him. I did my doctorate work on shame. I didn't shame him, and I knew how. Trust me, I know how. It's a nice thing about having your doctorate in toxic shame. You know how to give it as well as heal it.
That's amazing.
But and she will tell you this day. She goes, "You didn't judge me. You answered my question.
You could have.
I could have." I said, "Well, yeah, you filthy sinner. You're going to hell if you don't get married." I didn't say that. So here's what God says about that.
So we're so afraid. So in our compromising, we're afraid
Of
of
losing
the word
people.
of God and how it's going to affect people.
Yeah.
And so therefore we remove all the power,
Yep.
right? You have a form of godliness, but no power,
Yes.
no authority.
Yeah.
Is that when we can be called bad priests
Yes.
and prophets?
Because isn't that what he's talking about? He's this is in the book of Jeremiah.
Mm-hmm.
And we can go and we can look at Isaiah and we can look at Ezekiel and all of the prophets, the true prophets of God. Let's go back to Elijah. Which one of them had the prophets of Baal? Elijah and the prophets of Baal. It's not popular doing this. And I remember a missionary telling me one time, he was in my denomination, he said to me, Mark, if you preach holiness, you're gonna lose. Your church isn't gonna grow. It's gonna go down. It goes because people are gonna say this teaching's too hard for me.
They're going to walk away sad.
Holiness is not a hard concept when we realize it's God's work in us. It's not something I have to do on my own. It's God working in me.
But because we've taught so much that we work for God, not with God.
Yes.
That seems overwhelming.
Yeah.
I can't be
How do
perfect.
I live the next 50 years, Pastor, a sinless life right now?
Yep.
How can I do it right now?
Today.
Yeah.
What do I do today?
Yeah. And breaking that down in this moment, how do I live a holy moment right now, or a holiness right now with Andrew here? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I let the Holy Spirit flow through me, which is why Paul said, "Be being filled" is the accurate translation. If you get into the Greek, "be being filled." It's a constant flowing. It's a spring that just keeps flowing. That as it goes out, as our cup empties, the Holy Spirit's filling it to help us in any given moment.
So we don't need to lower the standard.
No.
We need to realize that Jesus is the gap with the standard.
And well, find me in other organizations. We'll see it. But you know what? If I want to join a club, was it Groucho Marx said I'd never want to be a member of a club or part of a club that I'm a member of.
Yeah.
Anything else, they say no. This is the standard. Yep. This is what it means. So people come in. I had someone do this to me one time. We had a house we were renting at one of the churches I was at, and this guy comes. He was immigrant, come in from another country. He wasn't true immigrant. I'll get in trouble for that one, I know, but you know what I mean. And he says, well, I'll rent it if you throw in the utilities. I says, I'm not throwing in the utilities. Well, you think about it. No, I don't need to think about it. This is the deal. Either you want the deal or you don't. Jesus did that with the rich young ruler. What must I do? What's the bare minimum? Jesus says, well, here's what you got. Well, I've done all that. Well, okay, then here's what else. You got to sell everything you have and give it to the poor. So I can't do that. Jesus didn't say, okay, well, it's okay. It's okay. No. But yet the church is expected to do things different than, the way they are in the world. But yet they don't want us to do it different in the world. They don't want to do it God's way. They want to do it their way. This is what makes me happy. And I like coming here. So I read a book a while back, and the guy was a mega church pastor, and he went to this thing, and he realized this is not working. This is long. I don't remember the name of the book, so I'm not going to work. But he went back to his church, and he went to a conference, and he felt bad because it was the top 10 mega churches in the country, and he was number 8, and he felt bad about that. And God started convicting him and opening his eyes and saying, there's more to this than building a big empire. And it started shifting. Just God was moving it. And his church like cut in half. And one lady came up to him and said, "Well, this is just in the church. You're preaching stuff I don't want to hear."
Yep.
And that was an eye opener to him. That okay, well, you're preaching stuff. When my biggest compliment is when my congregation comes up to me and says, "Well, you were general meddler today.
Yep.
You were meddling big
Step
time
down
today."
my toes.
And I always tell my congregation, I don't feel bad because I've been getting it all week. You got it for 40 minutes.
Yeah. So lots to chew on right there.
Yeah.
Right. Again, be careful. Be careful as you're labeling bad pastors and bad prophets. Are they a bad pastor and a bad prophet because they're not speaking what you want to hear? Or are they a bad prophet, bad pastor because they're not doing what God has called them to do? Those are two totally different things. I can be a great pastor because God and I are in tune and you just don't like what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Or I could be, or you could think I'm a really good pastor and God could say, you're a bad pastor because all you've done is compromise to get that person to like you.
Yep.
Okay? So chew on that. You figure out where you are on all of that stuff. And we'll come back right now. We'll come back next time. Counterculture.
Grace and peace.